All right, so moving along, we have with us today Dr. Don Phipps, who's a superintendent of Caldwell County Schools, and Dr. Katrina McEllen. If you want to share your screen, I know you guys are going to talk about educating during a pandemic. Feel free to take the screen from me and share forth, and then we'll pipe up with questions as they come in.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can see you on video and I see your slides. So thank you so much. I'm going to go on mute.
Great. We appreciate the opportunity to share some time with you. Dr. McEllen and I wanted to share what we've experienced in Caldwell County. Not that we're experts, not that we've done it better than anyone else, but we've done it and we've been in the middle of it. We've learned quite a bit going through the process in North Carolina. And we still have some school districts that have not returned in person in our state. And I'm sure some of the viewers that are out there online may or may not be back in school. And if you're not, then maybe some of the ideas that we share with you will help you as you start to do that planning. If you are, my guess is that you'll be able to relate to a lot of what we're sharing. And then at the end, we have our contact information. If you've got any great ideas or you can help us in some of the areas that we've struggled in, we would love to hear that. But I'm going to go through a few of the slides, let Dr. McEllen do that as well, and then we'll wrap up at the end, keeping an eye on the time that we have. As we consider what we've done in Caldwell County, and we're a county that's in the foothills of North Carolina. We're not too far from Appalachian State University. We deal with weather. In fact, we've had an ice storm threat today that we've been able to get through with no problems. But our location in the big picture of the pandemic has played a role in some of what we've had to deal with. And we'll talk about that when we talk about challenges and things that we've dealt with. But when we look back at the pandemic, we're really looking at two really broad periods of time. We're looking at the time from March until June, which really was the beginning of the pandemic for us, where our schools were impacted. Our governor in North Carolina basically told us that we could not have school in person, and we were thrown on our ear, had to pivot very quickly without any planning or any preparation, and basically we're in a survival mode until we got to the end of the school year. And we look back at what we did, and I think at the time we called that remote learning. And we learned a lot. And then we looked at what was going on in August when the school year started back, and we started back in person. So we've been in-person instruction with our students since August. Our middle and high school students can't come back full-time, so we have them on an abbreviated schedule, and our elementary students are in school 4 days a week, and we have Wednesdays designated as remote learning days and planning days for our teachers. So we're back in school and have been doing it for quite some time. So the focus that we really want to talk about from what we've learned is from August 2020 to the present, and really comparing how that time from August 2020 looks compared to the time prior to that. We had some challenges, and some of those I've mentioned in terms of geography, but we had some clarity issues that we needed to work through, definitions of what quote unquote remote learning meant, expectations for teachers, expectations for students. And we didn't think about this, but I think we learned it very quickly, roles and expectations for parents and guardians. In many cases, we had individuals who were not parents, who were caregivers for a child during the school day, that were working with a child and had taken on the role as a teacher or a teacher assistant, and they may or may not have been prepared to do that. The communication piece was critical, so we had to work through that. We had limited resources. At the time, we were not a one-to-one school system. We were working on devices in our building, and we had them in labs and computer areas and things like that, but we didn't have a device for every child that they took home. When this is over and the dust settles, we will have one device per child, and we'll be looking at what our implementation plan would be for technology. So we've grown in that particular area. We distributed devices without a real plan because students weren't coming back, and we needed to make sure that we had some form of contact with them. We created plans and guidance on the fly. We tweaked those along the way, and we continued to improve them. And then we had limited guidance for teachers, which was frustrating because many of them had not done very much in the virtual world, certainly not remote teaching. They had to learn an LMS. They had to learn how to post things online. They had to learn how to communicate. All of these things are things that you all have gone through. So I think you can relate to exactly where we are. Internet access and challenges. When you're in a mountainous area like we are, it's not always family cost factors, although those do come into play. We also found out that even if our local cable provider was willing to provide either free or discounted service, they wouldn't do that for families who had a current bill or a debt, which became an issue for us. And we certainly were not in a situation of being able to pay off people's cable bills. So we had to work around some solutions, and we've done that. And then the geography, just being in the mountain areas, is you have line of sight issues. You have areas that don't have any type of internet service. You have cell phone service areas that are really deserts that don't work well in our area. The contact that we had with students and families, we realized after a week or two that some of our children had just simply disappeared. We had no contact with them. The contact numbers that we had didn't work. If we sent social workers out, they weren't at the addresses that we're at before. And we realized that as the economy started to tank, that there were folks that lost jobs and they moved back with families from other places, or they moved just away from our area. So we spent a great deal of time trying to chase students down and make sure we knew where they were. Probably the biggest issue for me as a superintendent, and as I say this in the western part of North Carolina, my guess is this is going to be true for you no matter where you are. We started to really be aware that the non-academic needs were bubbling to the top and were something that we had to take care of. And these were the social and emotional needs. And I, for a long time, have said that mental health needs are probably the greatest need that we deal with in the school system. This became very evident to us early on as we went through this, and a lot of our work is centered around that. We established our routines with the 3 W's, the wearing the mask, the waiting so that you've got proper distance, and washing your hands. This later became one of our accomplishments. We had questions early on whether or not kindergartners could wear masks or would they wear masks. And we found out that they had adapted to what we were asking them to do. And that really turned out to be one of another accomplishment that we would add to our list. And all of the work that we were doing in our school system. I've been in this district for about 2.5 years. We've got leaders that have taken some positions since I've been here. We had a great deal of momentum going, with lots of practices and initiatives and programs that we had in place, and a very active school board. And when this hit, things stopped. The momentum did not continue. We had to focus on something other than what we were working on. And that was a real challenge for us, and something that we had to do. So we quickly had to realize some things. And I'm going to ask Dr. McEllen if she would go through these. Katrina, I don't have the numbers of the slides, but we'll work back and forth with this. But what we want to talk about is what we quickly realized. And I've got a feeling that everyone out there is going to say they can relate to this as well. And there may be some things that you can share with us that you did to overcome these. But this is from the Caldwell County perspective. So Dr. McEllen?
Okay. So when we first started with remote learning in March, there wasn't a lot of time for preparation for the teachers nor for the students and the families. So we ended up realizing some of the challenges that Dr. Phipps mentioned earlier with internet and such. Going strictly remote was not an option for us. So we had to be able to put information and work into packets and literally work out a schedule for when people could drive up to the school, pick up what they need, turn in what they had, and move on. And we certainly, when we left in March, thought we would be back even before the end of the school year, and it didn't turn out that way. And so trying to create information for teachers and resources for teachers and pull that together to help them plan for more of a long-term option than what we initially started, working with principals to work out routines and how to communicate that with the community as to what was going on. All of our typical end of the year events, thinking about prom, graduations, we had to take a step back and think, how can we still make these events special? Obviously, we didn't have a prom, but we certainly did want to have graduation events, and each school worked to do something that worked with their community, whether it was individual ceremonies and every student family had a time that they showed up, or whether we were graduating in parking lots. We worked hard to make those events what we wanted them to be. Obviously, athletics stopped, and we are working through athletics for this year. But we realized how important it was to communicate not only with our employees, with our staff, with our administrators, but also with the community, to keep them involved in what was going on, to help them assist their students in a new way. Trying to give whether it was the caretaker was the parent or the grandparent or a guardian or a neighbor, trying to give them resources to help them help the students, in addition to what the students were learning.
And Katrina, I wanted to add to that from a superintendent perspective. there was a time period from March when the pandemic piece started, and we realized after a few weeks that we weren't going to be back within a few days, and we started to worry about those year-end events. We spent a great deal of our energy with angst and anxiety and concern and trying to problem solve to try to make something happen that we eventually realized we had no control over. And we had different types of graduation ceremonies. And as it turns out, some of the schools and the parents and the students said they'd like to continue those types of ceremonies because they work so well. Once we got past that and we could put the end of the year behind us, it seemed like there was a relief valve that was pressed and we didn't have the same type of anxiety. It allowed us to move forward and start to plan for the new school year. So as we progress and go through that, life for us changed at the end of the school year when we gave up the worries and the concerns about graduation. We had those things behind us, and then we were able to move on.
Mhm. So if you think about, I think within schools and school districts and public education in general, we always want to be proactive, but we found ourselves in a situation where we had to react to what was going on. As we started planning for August, we were creating a couple different plans because we weren't sure how we were going to come back to school, but we always had to remind ourselves that, we had to be open to what was there, to be flexible. You couldn't plan for far in advance because we weren't sure what was going to happen. You're constantly monitoring the numbers of cases in your community, number of student cases, number of faculty cases to kind of gauge, okay, what is tomorrow going to look like? What is the next week going to look like? Much less trying to plan for long term because everything, we were still learning how things were going to go. We were able to begin to plan as we started, certainly thinking about from a staff's perspective, from a student's perspective, thinking about the family and the community needs. What did we need to do? What could we do to help them? We did as much as we could of purchasing the personal protective equipment, the PPE, the hand sanitizer in advance so that we had that ready to go when our school system did open. Working with routines, what would car rider line look like in the morning? What would pick up in the afternoon look like? How are we going to check temperatures when students enter the building? How are we going to make sure they're 6 feet apart? So creating routines to kind of manage what was going to happen in the building. And then I can't say enough about the partnerships within our community. We have Caldwell County is a great area. We have worked well with weekly meetings with our local health department, with the hospital here that is partnered with the UNC, the University of North Carolina health system, and with the community college. All of us meet regularly to talk about what is going on in each of our areas and what can we do. If we have questions, we talk through those. And I just can't speak enough to that partnership that we have with those groups to allow us to address issues and concerns as they pop up. Other things, so we talked a little bit about our issues with devices and internet capabilities, but we did not want lack of access to be a barrier for our students. So each school worked with their students and had students come by and pick up a device if they did not have a device at home. For those that were coming into school, those students had access to devices. We were able to purchase 300 Khajiit hotspots. So this allowed some of our families that did not have that internet access for a variety of reasons to be able to take the hotspot and set up a internet access point in their house. And so that helped those families and students access the internet, as well as we have very unique in our area. We have buses through a partnership with Google. We were able to create these rolling hotspots or rolling study halls where we can park a bus, whether it's at a school location or it's out in the community at a church or a local organization or business or at the community college. And as long as they're within so many feet of the bus, they can come in and get access to the internet. And so that's proved to be very beneficial for our community. And we have the map where they know where those hotspots are, and then they can locate those and get access to the internet. Okay. As we started the year, we knew communication was going to be important, that we needed to have constant communication, it seemed, with our administrators, with the principals in the buildings to see what was going on in their schools, what we could do to help them. So we ended up having, actually, I think for the first 2 weeks, it seemed like every other day we were getting on Zoom for about 30 to 45 minutes or an hour at the end of the day, end of the school day, to say, okay, what happened today? What were some of the issues? Maybe it didn't happen at your school, but it happened somewhere else, and let's talk through this. So that we were working through it as a district, and that we could all speak from the same page, so to speak. Our feeding program actually started very soon thereafter us going fully remote in March. Our child nutrition department, we can't speak more highly of them than, there's just so many accolades that we could lay on their shoulders for what they have done throughout March, through the summer, throughout the school year, to feed the children in our community from 0 to 18 years of age. And that's been a great accomplishment. We have worked from the curriculum side of things. We put together a remote teaching and learning website with resources on there for students, parents, and teachers. We had to switch our professional development. So instead of the face-to-face sessions that we were used to, we went with more remote options. We created some choice boards with all different links to videos, pre-recorded sessions. We switched our technology showcase to a virtual only, and we recorded those sessions as they were presented, and then posted those. So we've had to switch and change gears more quickly than I think we would have gotten there any other way, but it's been a great learning experience for us. Again, when we started thinking about remote learning back in June and July, we didn't know we didn't know how we were going to be able to open school, because we were waiting for word from the governor. So we prepared for a plan C if we were all virtual. We prepared for a plan B if we were going to be hybrid. And then we had to prepare that plan for a plan A if everybody could go back to school in a more normal fashion. We actually ended up being allowed to open under plan B, but we still have to have a virtual option, because we had families and students through whether medical conditions, we just didn't feel comfortable with what was going on, and we needed to have a virtual option. So we created a virtual academy, K-12, called Caldwell Connect, and ended up with about 25 to 30% of our population starting the school year in that virtual academy. Okay. And again, thinking about the community that we live in, we mentioned our partnership with the hospital and the health department, but we can't thank enough those people, organizations, businesses, churches in our area that have donated money to help us purchase additional technology, additional devices, additional hotspots. We didn't ask them. They came to us and said, what can we do to help you? And then we're able to raise money and really come through for us to help us meet the needs of our students. Here you see the number. Over 1.78 million meals have been distributed to families since March of 2020. So we wanted to make sure that everybody the students in our district had the opportunity to eat, that they weren't going to go without the things that they knew. We talked a little bit about the needs, whether we were working with our child care program within our school system to provide access to help our teachers work, to help parents go back to work, the feeding, the tutoring. We have a great organization that helps us with school supplies. We have churches that have donated school supplies, flash drives, anything that we have ever even thought that we needed. We had somebody there ready to stand up and to help us through that. And again, we can't speak enough about the partnership between the school district, the community college, the local hospital, and the health department. Those weekly calls, daily, in some cases it's daily, talking about cases, but it really helped us to move forward. What worked for us, we were very proactive in ordering a lot of personal protective equipment. I know there was a time when it was very scarce and hard to get, but we made sure that we handed out masks at the beginning of the year to all of our students. We handed them out again at the beginning of second semester to ensure that students had access to those. The hand sanitizer, the cleaning equipment, the cleaning materials, everything that they need. When you walk into our school buildings, you'll see stickers on the floor for where students are supposed to stand, or should try to make sure that they're 6 feet apart. Hallways are marked as one directional so that everybody's walking in the same direction so that you don't have students going different directions in the hallway. Water fountains became bottle fill stations to reduce spread in that manner. Again, Caldwell Connect allowed us to serve students in a remote fashion, but we also had that schedule for students coming in a hybrid manner, either 4 days a week or 2 days a week, depending on what they were, and then preparing for the remote instruction for the other days. We have the handheld thermometers, but we also have the thermal cameras that allow us in some of our high schools to be able to take a quick pulse of what's going on. We do have some guidelines that we had to follow related to quarantine and isolation, but as a school district, we created flow charts. We were able to come out with guidance to help our schools and our staff members know what to do when somebody tests positive. If somebody's showing symptoms, that we have these protocols and flow charts that we follow. With our virtual academy, we did give students at the elementary level the option to switch to face-to-face learning at the end of the first 9 weeks, and then again at the end of the first semester. And our middle school and high school students, we'd asked for that semester commitment so that they were able to exit at that point. Sorry. Other things that we did on our buses, we were limited in the number of students that could ride on buses, so we did have to shorten bus routes. So we do have several buses that are doing double routes or triple routes just based on the number of students, but it allows us to get students home in a shorter amount of time. Attendance schedules, we're currently operating on an AABB schedule for our middle and high school students. But we did, we have throughout this whole time, we have kept our Board of Education up to date. We have met whenever we needed to. If we needed to call a meeting and discuss, here's what's going on. Are you in support of, here's where we want to move forward, here's where we are, and just giving them the chance to adjust and give us any direction that they had related to that. We realized early on that devices that we had, especially for those teachers that were fully remote, didn't have all the bells and whistles necessarily that they needed to be able to do a lot of the live synchronous sessions. So we were able to upgrade the technology for those teachers to have that better experience. And we did end up separating. We have certain teachers that teach all online, and then the rest, and other teachers that are teaching full face-to-face students. And then, certainly on our current schedule, they're remote when needed, but it just helped us with our scheduling. As we move forward, or things that in hindsight might have been a better way to serve students, in our current AABB schedule, we see students 2 days in a row, and then we go 5 days, if you count the weekend, without seeing students again. In hindsight, we feel like we need a more consistent connection with our students. Relationships are everything. And learning remotely is hard for our students. And so, if we had to do this over or have to do it again, we would certainly be looking at more of a consistent schedule of ABAB to get that more consistent contact. Putting in more synchronous sessions. Again, the more we can get our face on these students and build those relationships. It's hard to build a relationship strictly through electronic communication, like an email, without having that conversation. Actual conversation with someone. So we're looking at ways to increase the amount of synchronous opportunities that we have, whether it's through a schedule or through a class or through what they're doing. And then the mental health. We can't, I don't think we can speak enough about the mental health of both our staff and our students. Just trying to put things in place. That was a place we were headed before we got stuck in COVID, so to speak. But just the ways that we can focus and help that moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. McEllen. What I wanted to finish with is just a question that I posed to our leadership team last week. And I told them we were going to be doing a presentation and share in their own words what they wish they knew back then that they've learned now. And you see some of those comments on the slides. And my guess would be, if we asked you this, you would say something very similar. The thing I heard over and over again was folks said they wish they would have known that this was going to last as long as it has lasted. Again, in hindsight, we understand things a little bit better. How hard it was going to be to get students to complete work online. how long it would take to get technology. And again, had we known what we were going to be dealing with, we could have ordered devices prior to March. But when we all joined in and joined together and ordered at the same time, we had a backlog. But how many changes we would face, how much time it would take to create the virtual experience. I had one person who said that educating people would be safe, and there was a lot of worry about that. Folks were concerned about coming in. You'll see on here that one person said they were concerned about how much time they were going to have to spend taking temperatures, dealing with IEPs and 504 plans. I had a principal who told me they wish they had spent a little bit more time as an instructional coach. And it doesn't mean that the ship has sailed and we can't do it. We've gone back now and spent more time doing those types of things. But particularly if you're a school system that hasn't come back, there's some things that you can learn from those who have. Additional duties that folks had to take on. So we had people that were having to take temperatures and doing other roles that aren't normal in a regular school year, that took them away from their regular class assignments, system goals, levels, and expectations. The lack of parental support, which we mentioned earlier, we had to train parents and let them understand what we needed from them as well. So this is just a snapshot. Western North Carolina, one county's way of doing things. Again, we're not promoting this as the best way to do it, but we wanted to share some ideas. And if it helps a school district or a professional in some way, we feel like our time has been well spent. Our contact information is there on the screen. We're wrapping up just a couple of minutes before 2:30, and we'd be glad to take any questions if anyone has any.
Okay, so this is Leilani back online. So asking everybody that's on right now, ask your questions, make your comments, please. And we'll be watching chat if you raise your hand. So what I just want to say is that I'm proud of you. And, we've been talking to schools all across the country since late March. And it's been a mad scramble. It's almost like you went to war. It's like, and then the battles just kept going. But I want to ask you one last thing, both of you answer, is that do you feel like you're in a permanent mutation pattern now? Like it's not ever going to be really normal again?
I'm a person who likes to plan, don't like surprises. I've had to learn to live 2 weeks at a time. And that may help me, I think, down the road, but I really would like to get into long-term planning. We're getting ready to do our strategic plan. And when we think about that, we're thinking about a 5-year window. And we just haven't been able to operate that way. And I think in some ways, there's been a mutation that will be good, that will carry with us. In some ways, there may have been a mutation that is not quite as positive, and we've got to overcome that. So I think that's a constant challenge that we have, is to look at the big picture and try to make the most out of the positive and minimize any negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree. Dr. McEllen.
I don't think we'll ever be what we were. And as Dr. Phipps said, I think there's certainly things that we've learned and things we will take with us. Certainly how we've designed some of our professional development now, and some of the resources and things that we're doing that we hadn't done before. I think it kind of pushed us in a good way to really look at what we were doing and ways to give our teachers more choice and voice than maybe we had done previous and prior to that. And just, I think it pushed us along in a lot of ways that we weren't expecting, but in good ways. And so I think, I don't know that we will ever be what we were, but I always hope that we keep moving forward and we're better with everything that we do.
Good for you guys. And I'm glad you're counting your blessings, because it is a blessing that any learning at all occurred. I mean, 15 years ago, no one would have been able to afford devices out to all the kids, and we would not be sitting here with hardly any learning. We'd be sending packets out, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of blessing in what's happened, because we still got some, So thank you both so much for your hard work. I'm sending you a big Edu Jedi hug from the Edu Jedi leadership, and continue. Keep going.